Hello, welcome back. This is Pastor Rich Neal at St. Timothy Lutheran Church, Grand Island, New York, and I'm welcoming you back to the series we're running, Teach Us to Pray. This is part two. We're looking at various styles to pray with Scripture that reflect our personality style and may be more comfortable for us than other styles we've tried in the past. We're going to be covering this series, the basic style of praying with Scripture, Lectio Divina, or holy reading. And we're going to, in subsequent weeks, look at four different variations of that style that are profiled or conformed to fit our personality probably much better than others that we've used. So last week we covered the basic introductory style, the Benedictine style, that outlined four steps of praying with Scripture. And we're going to start the first of those variations this week, this coming Wednesday, and cover that a little bit in this video. But before I do that, I want to go back and just review a little bit, very quickly, the four steps in this style of prayer that we're using. It's called Lectio Divina because it refers to a style of reading with Scripture. It can also be used with other texts, but it invites God into our conversation and opens our hearts and minds a little more to what God may be saying to us. The first step in the style of prayer called Lectio Divina is a reading, where we really just spend some time reading the Scripture several times, perhaps aloud. And we might also look at some background material to help us understand what the text itself is saying in its context. Sometimes it's helpful to read a few verses prior to the text you've chosen and to read a few verses after that to see where the story of the Scripture fits into the overall story. But the first step is reading. The second step then is to meditate on that Scripture. It's to really be quiet in your mind and your heart, and also your surroundings, so that you're free as possible of distractions. And then to listen closely to what that Scripture is saying. What does it say to you as one who prays? What message or question does it address to your life personally? The third step in that series of steps is prayer. And that's where we turn the conversation around and we start saying to God what's on our hearts. We've read the Scriptures in step one. We've listened in step two to what the Scriptures say to us. And now in step three, the prayer step, we actually say to God what's on our minds and hearts. We offer questions or pleas or expressions of need or concern, whatever it comes up in our hearts, having read that Scripture. And then finally, the fourth step is contemplation, where we simply rest in what's happened. We stop the process that we've been employing and we simply rest and let ourselves enjoy what has happened. Give thanks for what's happened. Give praise for what's happened, whatever moves you at that point. As you get into this and become more familiar with the process, it's possible to rearrange these steps a bit. You may find that you start off reading the Scripture and then move into meditation and prayer, but then you might go back and read the Scripture again because an idea or a question has come to you and you want to pursue it a little further. Make the process your own and make it work for you in whatever way works for you. Now, the four variations of this basic Benedictine style of prayer with Scripture are based or directed toward supplementing and enhancing or working better with the four basic styles of personality, according to the Myers-Briggs personality profile. There are a lot of variations of the personality that you will discover if you take the personality profile, but those boil down to four basic styles, and we'll be using those four styles to guide our learning in this series. The four basic styles, if you've taken the profile, you'll know these letters are the NF, the NT, the SJ, and the SP. The intuitive thinking, the intuitive feeling, the sensing, perceiving, and the sensing, judging. It takes a little while to learn what those terms mean in the Myers-Briggs language, but if we know the letters that we test out at, that indicate what personality we have, what preference we have, it becomes easier to use these 4 different styles of prayer. You can get the Myers-Briggs results by simply taking a brief variation of that profile. It's called the Keirsey Temperament Sorter. I referred to this last week. You can find it online at keirsey.com. That's KEIRSEY.com. And when you open that link, the first thing you'll see is a button called Start. Click on that, and it'll take you right through the examination or the profiling. It's free of charge. It takes maybe 15 or 20 minutes to complete, and it gives you the results immediately. So I welcome you to try that. If you're not comfortable with computers and would like to do it as a paper profile, then you'll find on our website a link to that document. You'll get a document of 70 questions and an example of how the answer sheet is filled out, and then a blank answer sheet for you to use in determining your profile. When you finish that, you'll get a series of 4 letters that indicate what your profile is. But we use a shorthand version of that. So as you look at your letters after completing the profile, if your second letter is an N, then you pair that with the third letter. So it's either an NF or an NT, an intuitive feeling or an intuitive thinking. If your second letter is an S, then you pair that letter with the fourth letter. So it's an SJ or an SP, a sensing judging or sensing perceiving. And if you know which of those 2-letter shorthands is your personality preference, you'll find it a lot easier to find which prayer style fits your personality best. If you don't do that exam, if you don't like to do that sort of thing, or if you don't have easy access to it, then you'll also find on our website a document that describes each of those 4 basic personality types. It's just a little thumbnail sketch that suggests what's typical in most cases of personality types NF, NT, SJ, and SP. You'll find some things in each of those descriptions that don't quite fit, and that's okay. And you'll find things that do fit in other types. We got really broad personalities, and they're complex and they're wide-ranging, and so it's normal to find affinity for one or more types of personality. Also, remember that not all of those categories are absolute. They don't contain the whole of us. We do bleed over, and we have aspects of our personality that show up in different ways. So pursue those as you feel drawn to do that. And we'll work with all 4 of those during our series. Now today I want to introduce you to one particular variation of that basic Benedictine style of Lectio Divina. And it's called the Augustinian style because it really resonates with St. Augustine, one of the early patriarchs of the church. It's for the personality type NF, the intuitive feeling. And although it's not the most common type of personality, it is the most common type in church settings where people are concerned with spiritual development and study, and most of the people who take retreats are typically NF personality styles. So the offshoot of that is that you'll have the greatest number of resources available to you in books or videos or retreat centers. Most of those resources are really well suited for the NF personality type. But in the NF personality type of approach to this prayer, the Augustinian prayer, Lectio Divina, there are a couple of important differences in what you began last week with part 1. Certainly you want to follow the 4 steps: the reading, the meditation, the prayer, and the contemplation. But you do it with a little different personality, a little different twist to it, different emphasis. And the word that describes that is imagination and transposition, an imaginative transposition. And what we're trying to do then is simply take the scriptures out of their context and apply them to us directly, personally. You probably think of it more as a dialogue with God, that the scriptures are not written just for the church in a certain period of time, but they're addressed to you directly. And each of us takes that approach in the NF style. 2 examples will help you understand how this can be used most effectively. One of those examples is from the 43rd chapter of Isaiah. And I'll read just a couple of verses of that as we get started so you know what's there. And then I'll show how you might use that as an NF personality style. So here's what the text actually says. But now, O Israel, the Lord who created you says, do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I've called you by name. You are mine. When you go through deep waters and great trouble, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. So in the Augustinian style of prayer, the NF personality type would simply trade words where the scripture says Israel, or later the name Jacob comes up. You'd simply take out that word and replace it with your own name. As an example, I might pray as an NF type. But now, O Rich, the Lord who created you says, do not be afraid, for I've ransomed you. I've called you by name. You are mine. Or, but now, O Barbara, the Lord who created you says, do not be afraid. Or now, O Frank, or now, O Bill, or now, O Bonnie, or whatever your name is, put it in there in place of the name that you find in Scripture. And let that be your first part, your reading and your meditation. And then as you begin the prayer part, you're responding more personally to what God has said to you more personally. Another example is in Paul's first letter to the Corinthians in chapter 13. It's the well-known love chapter. And about a paragraph into that chapter, 4 verses into it, here's what the text says. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Love does not demand its own way. Love is not irritable, and it keeps no record of when it has been wronged. Well, as an NF type, using this style of prayer, you would replace the word love with your name. So in my case, it would read this way. Richard is patient and kind. Richard is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Richard does not demand his own way. Richard is not irritable and keeps no record of when he has been wronged. Well, I think you get the sense of that. And you can use that well with the Psalms, with most of the prophets, with much of the Gospel or the New Testament letters. So try that during the coming week. You'll find a written description of that prayer style on our website for you to download and keep in your hands, keep in your library. And as you read each of those scriptures that you've chosen with your name in place, begin that dialogue with God in the prayer section of the prayer step of the Lectio Divina. What does it spark in you? What does it prompt in you as a response or as an insight? What do you gain from it? What is God telling you personally? and then respond to God in whatever way you're moved to do so. Well, that's it for today. You'll find more help perhaps in looking at that printed version of the style of prayer that you find on the website. You'll find, in addition to that, a one-page summary of the Augustinian type of personality, the NF type of personality. You may find it fits well, and you may find it doesn't fit very well for you, but there may be highlights that you resonate with. So that's just a little insight into what that personality type is like. And remember, you can get a paper version of the Kiersey Temperament Sorter online at our website to download and take that yourself, along with a score sheet and an example of how that score sheet is to be used. Or you go online to Kiersey.com, KEIRSEY.com, to take the instrument online. Well, best wishes to you as you pray with this new style of prayer with Scripture. And remember to join us on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, at 7 p.m. on our Zoom meeting to help discuss insights or questions or observations that you may have about this style of prayer. I'm glad you joined us today, and we'll look forward to working with you, studying with you, and learning with you in the days and weeks ahead.